or secondhand bravery, where the person being brave might not need to think they're brave, but you think they're brave. And so then you are inspired to do something different with your life.
Hello and welcome to the Visibility Vixen podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Lewis, and this show is 100% geared to come alongside you, give you a huge hug, and encourage you to keep going down this crazy trail of entrepreneurship. Between myself and the many incredible guests that come on to talk to you, you're going to leave each episode feeling inspired, motivated, and a little bit more balanced for the road ahead. I'm all about building a brand of integrity, purpose, and skyrocketing your visibility so that you can step into that incredible mission you were born to live. So grab a cup of iced tea, pop in those earbuds, and let's chat. And we are live. Excellent. Oh my goodness. Today is an exciting day because my dear friend Emily Ann Peterson is here on the show. Darling, welcome to the Visibility Vixen podcast.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. This is so fun.
So I was excited on Emily's fantastic show, BareNaked Bravery, a couple months ago and just fell in love with her. She is the most just beautiful soul, right? And I was excited when we were going into podcasting month because I was like, yeah, I got to get Emily on here. So darling, hello, welcome. And please let the Visibility Vixen audience know who you are, what you do, all of the things that make you fabulous, including your studio room behind you.
Sure. So I'm today we're talking from Atlanta, Georgia, which is where my music studio is currently. Awesome. And I've got a tenor guitar back there and a cello and a piano over on this side and a couple guitars in the back corner. I am a nomadic singer-songwriter. So I've got like homes or home bases in the Seattle area and Atlanta and a bunch of contacts all over the US. And I started my music career as a cello teacher, and then got diagnosed with a hand tremor in my right hand. And so my career completely took a very sharp left turn. And I started getting, when I was diagnosed, I had like an enormous grieving period that I went through because the cello I have been playing, I still play. I have been playing the cello for over 20 years now. So that's been a big part of my life to have to completely change gears out of. So in that grieving process, I just knew that I was going to need to get brave, and I didn't really know what that meant. I mean, I had read a bunch of Brene Brown books on courage and all that stuff, but I still didn't know, like, the first you do this, then you do this, then you do this. Or here's a list of things or exercises that you get to do to build your bravery over time. Like there just wasn't anything out
for that.
No.
Yeah. No.
And the definition of bravery in and of itself is a pretty big hot mess. Like people don't really know what it means. We kind of have this general idea, this vague idea of what it means. So I started researching it, and then that became a book that I started writing, which has not come out yet. But in the research process of this book, I started having these really phenomenal conversations with these people who I admired so much. And that became a podcast, because what happened was, I was thinking, I'll just use this interview as, book fodder.
Sure.
But then when the interview got done, I would get finished and I go, gosh, more people need to experience this interview beyond just an easy quote that gets copied and pasted into a book.
They need to feel that like emotional situation.
Exactly, because that's where the bravery happens. Like the bravery is not just on the outside. A lot of the bravery that we experience and that we see on a day-to-day basis, it starts on the inside somehow. It starts with that like chemical catalytic relationship between one person and another. So that's what my podcast, BareNaked Bravery, is all about. And I get to interview all these wonderful, phenomenal people like yourself who do really brave things, or people who don't think they're brave and they don't have any idea why I'm having them on, but I think they're brave because they're doing X, Y, Z, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what the podcast is all about. But I also, I play concerts and I teach classes and workshops about bravery, and I help creative entrepreneurs put themselves out there in a really brave but authentic way, because that's really important. And I know you agree with me.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I think that some people think, oh, that person's just brave or just courageous. It's just who they are. And it's like, no, at least I believe that bravery is built. And a perfect example is what you had to go through when your whole line of work. And for those of you that don't know in the audience, which you probably don't because I've never told you, I am a violinist and I grew up doing that in school. It wasn't my number one passion to then go to school. And plus I had headaches at the time, so the playing made it worse. But the bravery is gradually built through these obstacles, like you having the hand tremor and figuring out what else can I do? How else can I serve? And it's such an important journey. And there's so many women that come into the group that feel irrelevant, that feel like they've been through too much hardship and failure to try again, ones that just don't see any value in who they are or what they do. So I think that what you touch on is such a gorgeous, gorgeous concept that more people need to hear.
It's true. And I think, a lot of times we see someone who is being brave and either they don't think they're brave at all, or they know it and they're terrified, or they've come out the other end and they know that they're brave, but they weren't always brave. And they kind of got popped out on the other end and went, oh my gosh, I'm doing something really brave. Wow. Who is this that I call myself, me, myself, and I? You can surprise yourself with your own bravery if you're not aware that you're building it over time, which is great. That's wonderful. But for those of us like myself, who I'm in a creative environment where I have to daily, not just online, but when I'm in concerts or playing music with other people, that's a really brave thing to do. Like, I do not take it lightly when somebody plays a song for me, or when one of my music students, shares with me their new stuff. I take that so sacredly because I know that it is such a big deal to put yourself out there in that way. So I battle with this bravery, put yourself out there stuff all myself. Like, I'm right in there in the thick of it. But what I have seen through witnessing and talking with all these other really wonderful, brave people is that, like you said, bravery is built. And if you know you're building it, oftentimes that process goes a little faster than just like getting in the slog and the thick of it and kind of trudging up through life and then hoping, wishing, and praying that one day you'll come out the other end a better person, So yeah.
Well, and that makes me think about, I think a lot of people look at thought leaders like you or me and they go, oh my gosh, they're doing so much and they're just kind of escalating and flying and da-da-da-da-da. They don't see the moments before that webinar, before that launch, before that newsletter goes out where we feel fear, or when we're really up leveling and our body is detoxing and we're just like a hot mess on the couch. They don't get to see all of that. And so they think that we're these kind of like perfect people. And I think it's really important to bring to light, no, like, we're going through just as much crap as you are. We just make the choice to keep going. And that's such an inspirational thing. And I think something that you do through your show.
And I think, it also depends on kind of what business or how you're, basically all this is, we're managing expectations of the people around us. And that is a really hot, sticky subject. I mean, I like to say I have a life PhD in self-image because in growing up, I had an eating disorder, and I learned how to heal with the help of other people through that. I learned how to treat myself well. But what that experience also gave me was a really keen, super keen awareness of what I am pretty like 90% sure what other people think about me. Just because that muscle was really trained really well when I was in the midst of that eating disorder. But, granted, the method in which I gained that skill is not ideal. I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
Yeah.
However, the gem or the what I came out with it is this really keen observational skill that allows me to make new connections within my art. It allows me to make new connections within, like, person to person, between me and an audience member at a concert, or me and an audience member in the podcast, or between me and the guest. Like, I'm able to handle the situation with a little bit more confidence than the average bear.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm perfect, and I'm definitely not saying that that it works out every time, because it definitely doesn't work out every time. But the confidence and the willingness to own up to your imperfections is what gives me the green card to waltz into somebody's life and ask a really pointed question and have them go, "Oh my gosh, I've never been asked that question before." Oh, interesting, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Well, and I think that this is why, even though I tend to help people more of the stuff behind visibility and the blocks, I always encourage them to start with my Life Reboot course, because we tend to come into business and go, oh, I can grow this, oh, I can do this, da 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 da. But if we don't look into our wounds, traumas, injuries, as we try to up level, they will throw us right back in the dirt. So this is a really important thing that you're bringing up, and this is why I tell people. I just had a woman that I was coaching, and she was going to do an online challenge, which was such a great idea. She's such a fantastic person, and I said, for your best benefit, go and do this work first, because it's going to take the amount of effort you have to put in and decrease it, because you're going to start changing your energetic patterns to attract. And that's what I wish I would have known so much earlier when I got started in the business, because every time I tried to increase my subscriber list or launch a course, it felt like walking through sludge. And as I started doing more of the self-work and resolving things and working on my self-image and all these things that I'd had since middle school that I hadn't really faced in this context, once I dealt with that, it was amazing what started attracting and the opportunities and all of that kind of stuff. So this work is so, so key and so, so important.
It really is. And if you're putting yourself out there in a business framework, or in a, like, you're exchanging money after you've put yourself out there is a direct tie to value.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you put yourself out there with a course or with a product or an album release, in my case, and it doesn't get the results that you think it will, financially, traffic, whatever you're talking about, if the numbers don't give you the same feedback that you were expecting, then that can be a huge, like, bathroom floor moment is what I call those.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So, so true. So I want to transition a little bit to talk about your podcast, and what has this process been like for you, in terms of, a lot of people feel like they have a message, feel like the world needs to hear what they have to say, or the people that they want to interview, but there's a block there in terms of, I don't know if it's the right time, I'm not established enough. So talk us through your journey and what you would say to someone having those mental blocks.
This has been something that I wish that somebody had told me before I started, because when I was in the thick of launching it all, I kept reading all these, like, your launch is a big deal, your launch is this huge, massive thing.
Everywhere.
And
Yeah,
it's like, it's so overwhelming to hear that, like, oh, that first 3 days is going to really kick you in the butt. Like, and after, being a year into it, almost a year into it, I know now that a podcast is an audio blog.
Mm-hmm.
You just, if you have, first of all, you have to be in it for a committed amount of time before you see any sort of kind of results.
Yeah.
Whatever those results are.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fruit is at the end of at the end of the harvest, right? Not at the beginning when you plant the seeds. So you have to be really consistent about putting out things at an expected amount of time. So like every week or every other week or twice a week or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one thing that, it's more important that you are consistent than your launch being successful. So if you feel like your launch needs to be kind of like a boo launch, not a big, huge bang of a launch, then that's fine. I think that is totally, totally cool for you to do it that way.
And it's important because at least I don't know about you, but when I went to launch, there were people like Mariah Cause launched Femtrepreneur and overnight had like 100 5-star reviews and all this stuff. And people were like, oh yeah, you have to get on the new and noteworthy and all that. There's a lot of pressure to, with your first episode, like, have this huge explosion. So you go into it putting this expectation on yourself, and then you have a couple people listening, you feel like this huge fat failure. And for me, I was like, well, I don't have that big of a list yet, but I really want to do this. And so I just jumped on, and it took time, but there was that gradual following that built. So that's a really important point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Mm-hmm. And I have not, you get into a rhythm of it and you start to learn little tricks about like what works, what doesn't work. I just say go and just launch. If you're waiting to collect 10 episodes before you go for it, just launch with 3. You're gonna be fine.
Mm-hmm. I love, and as long as whatever.
and as long as you're consistent, that's the most important thing. I think.
I agree.
So I think I've heard in a lot of the Facebook groups out there, that you see somebody just join going, oh my gosh, I just started, blah, blah, blah. And you can hear it in just the Facebook group. You can read between the lines. They're over there hyperventilating into a brown paper bag. And what they don't realize is that they can't, it's not that big a deal to hyperventilate in it every single week.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to be doing this every single week, not just once. So if you think about it as 100 tiny micro launches as opposed to one big huge launch, that made it a little bit easier for me to realize. So
I think that's such a good point. And it is a slow and steady race. And I think that it's also, you have to remove the expectations from it. You give your best is good enough. You do it with the intention of specifically reaching the people you want to reach, and then you release it. I think there's a really interesting energetic exchange that happens when you do that. And it's like next week we're going to be airing an episode where I brought some audience members of the show in to talk about their favorite episodes, and like some of them really surprised me, where I was like, oh my gosh, like I recorded that one, like it was 20 minutes of me just explaining something, and when it launched at the time I got 0 feedback, but this is someone's favorite episode. So you never know what's going to happen as things progress when people find your show.
It's true. And I would also say that a lot of podcast listeners don't interact. So if you put something out there and you think nobody's listening, they probably are. They just are in the car whenever they're listening to you, or
at the gym,
they're cooking dinner and they don't. Exactly. So if you are consistently putting things out there, then they fall in love with you just a little bit more, and they go, you know what, I'm going to send this chick an email.
Yeah.
And I've actually had a couple friends. I was talking with a friend last week, and I asked him if he was listening to any podcasts lately, and he listed a couple that I already knew of, which I love, and then he goes, and then I listened to that one episode that you did with that one chick. I interviewed Becky Mollenkamp, who's a copywriter, and her brother died of a heroin overdose, and so Becky and I's conversation was all about like what happens, how can you as a business owner and a creative entrepreneur set in place like toolkits for when the really bad days happen, because her business took a really big hit after this massive, very understandable life event.
Yeah,
and
of course.
and I deal with depression, seasonal depression from time to time. So she and I were just kind of riffing on like our favorite ways to prevent our business from taking the hit that we are taking as the business owner.
Right.
Anyways, so that's the gist of the episode. It's a wonderful episode. You should go listen to it. But my friend was telling me, he was like, yeah, it was a little too heavy for me to listen to the whole thing in one sitting, but I really enjoyed it. I was like, and I hadn't heard any of that feedback yet from anybody, but I really appreciated hearing that feedback. So yeah, I would have never known it had he and I not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So tell me some of your favorite moments on your journey with the show, whether it be some of your favorite episodes or guests, some of the favorite feedback that you've received, and how have you grown through this process of hosting a podcast?
Sure. Well, so, I mean, the whole premise of the show was me interviewing people who I thought were brave. And I think one of my favorite aspects of this whole process is that at the end of every interview, after the recording is done, I ask this person, my interviewee, who they think I should interview next.
Ooh.
Right. So there's a lot of people who have told me, oh my, how do you find all these crazy cool people on this show? And it's mainly because I started with the people who I thought were brave. And then I asked all of them who they thought were brave. And then I asked all of those people who they thought were brave.
Total like ripple effect.
Totally. Exactly. Which that ties directly to the notion that we have a version of bravery called resonant bravery or secondhand bravery, where the person being brave might not need to think they're brave, but you think they're brave. And so then you are inspired to do something different with your life as a result. So
I have goosebumps down my entire body when you said resonant bravery.
Yeah,
like, I'm gonna need to shave tonight. Like I'm getting crazy goosebumps today.
But that's what happens when you set your content up to just kind of go wherever it wants to go. So I have a structure, right? But I have enough openness. I'm holding my content calendar with an open hand, so I'm letting it go where it wants to go.
And that's a lot of intention. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. And it's a newer concept to most people, especially as they come on to our show to listen or in our group and all that kind of stuff. And it's so, so, so important that instead of, well, I hope that people like this show, I hope that this is a good podcast, I hope, instead of just going, I'm here in this beautiful moment, I'm going to take full advantage of this with the intention that there's one person out there in the world that's going to get hope, inspiration, or motivation somewhere out there. And like, I don't know about you, but that's what I do after every show when I send it out there. And it's really such a powerful thing. That frequency is so, so fantastic. So I love that.
I mean, you asked, one other thing that is really wonderful about this is that I started interviewing a couple of people who I thought were really brave. Some of those people are actually my, like in business speak, my avatar, like people who I want to work with on a day-to-day basis. And so sometimes I will interview someone new with the intent, imagining one of our previous guests in the room.
Ooh, yes.
So then we're talking about bravery amongst the three of us. I'm referring, I basically have the interview as if there's a third person in the room.
That's
as opposed to on a stage with a bunch of people.
Really having that, it's an intimate space, but there's a seat for your listener. And that's, more goosebumps, guys. There's going to be a heavy leg shaving tonight. Okay. So how have you felt yourself grow through this process?
Well, I mean, I'm in the thick of this too. I mean, I know I mentioned that, but I'm learning what bravery looks like to me just as much as my listeners are as well. Like, I'm learning right along with them. Mm-hmm. I have had more experience in like formal research of all of this subject, so there's a little bit of that. But I've changed so much. I think one of my favorite parts about podcasting is that I get a passport to ask anyone for time to chat.
Yes.
Right? And that is one of my favorite parts. I think the only person who has denied me for an interview thus far is Trevor Noah. And his publicist got back to me and was like, his schedule's a little bit too busy for this. And I was like, totally understandable. Yes. But had to ask. But everyone who
never know.
Totally. And everyone that I've asked has always said, "Oh, cool. Yeah, that sounds awesome." So, if you're asking the right people and your show, that might not work depending on what your show is about. But in my case, it really gives me a good leg up to be noticed. Mm-hmm. And I would say that is an added benefit, is that I got into it thinking I'm going to put all this stuff out there to a big group of people, but now I see that what it actually has done is connect me with folks like you and your listeners, and also all of my guests. Like, now I know I can send them an email and let them know about cool things that are happening, or ask them for a favor, or they know they can do the same for me too. So there's that extra level of networking that I wasn't expecting from this, that I really appreciate.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I do agree. It's beautiful to have, because really when you go back to your podcast library, that's a legacy that you're building and an experience that your audience members can go through with you, which is fantastic. And then there's this community building of the guests that you bring on that you really like click with, that you resonate with. Like, I know I can email you, you can email me. I've done trainings for you. You're coming into the purpose-led podcasting course and doing a training for me. You're able to really enhance your entrepreneur experience. And I love that about podcasting.
Mm-hmm. It's really fun. And I think, this is a new feature of the whole listener experience, but I just added a Facebook group for all of the podcast listeners. So,
nice.
BareNaked Bravery Facebook group. It blew me away. I had no idea that starting just the Facebook group would blow me out of the water like it did. People were dropping in all these things that they think they're doing that they are doing that they think are brave, and it is brave. Pictures of wonderful pieces of artwork.
Wow.
The podcast guests are able to jump in and be part of the community too. And so it's just been so cool to just step back and watch it unfold. It's an honor, for sure. It's an honor.
What a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. Oh, fantastic. So I know that people are going to want to connect with you. So what freebie are you offering them, and where can they listen to your show?
Sure. So if you go to BareNakedBravery.com, that's the way to do it. And there is a bravery bundle for you. Depending on the season of the year, I switch things in and out. But at this point of the year, I've got 2 songs, a track from my cello yoga album. So it's just instrumental cello layered upon cello. It's beautiful.
Cello is my favorite, so I'm going to be grabbing that.
As a cellist who knows that you are a violinist, I appreciate that. The second song is an original song that's on my first EP called Horton's Hope, and it's based out of Horton the Elephant's story. And from Horton Hears a Who. And then the third thing is the BareNaked Bravery coloring book, for those of you that like to color. And then the fourth thing is a worksheet of bravery boosting prompts, so that whenever you're going through one of those bathroom floor moments, you can go through and ask yourself these 12 questions and kind of come out going, you can actually leave the bathroom after asking yourself the 12 questions.
Wow. I love that it's so eclectic, right? It's not just one thing, it's different experiences. That's fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to link all of that below, whether you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on iTunes and Stitcher. And the way that you access that is clicking on those 3 dots, clicking view full description, and then you can actually click on the links. So I will have links to her website, to her social media, to her podcast, everything, and you can feel free to claim those there. So as we part, my dear, give us one inspiring word about bravery before we close out today.
So I will say the same thing that I end every episode with, which is we need your vulnerability, we need your imagination, we need your improvisation, and we really need your bare naked bravery, because only you can give it to us.
More chills, guys. More chills. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on to the show, my dear. And if you want to hear more from Emily Ann, be sure to come into Purpose-Led Podcasting to get her customized training. It's going to be fantastic. And I'm sure you're going to be back on the show soon, my dear. And we will talk to you later.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks for listening in today to the Visibility Vixen podcast. Subscribe now and share with a fellow Vixen who wants to start building their visibility. For more fire in your life and brand, visit visibilityvixen.com.